After spending nearly 100 hours with Europa Universalis V, it becomes clear that this grand strategy monolith is both the most ambitious and the most contradictory entry in the series. Europa Universalis V is not a game that simply teaches beginners its systems. It slowly pulls them into its rhythm, one layer at a time. What defines the beginner experience most is how EU5 constantly shifts between moments of clarity and moments of confusion, yet always leaves you wanting to push a little further. When you start playing as a newcomer, the world map feels intimidating, not only because it is huge, but because it gives the impression that everything matters at once. The top bar is filled with icons, the right side of the screen constantly updates, and the provinces are covered in colors, symbols, and tooltips. Yet the game does something crucial right from the beginning. It doesn't demand that you interpret all of this immediately. It guides your attention to just one or two systems, highlights them, and pauses the action until you understand what it's trying to show you. This is an enormous step forward compared to Europa Universalis IV, where even veteran strategy players often felt lost for the first several hours. The tutorial isn't just a wall of text. It feels like a teacher standing next to you, pointing at different parts of the interface while also giving you short, manageable tasks. These tasks function as miniature lessons. Instead of telling you what the economy is, the game asks you to perform a simple economic improvement, shows you where to click, and then explains what changed after you did it. Beginners quickly discover that Europa Universalis V doesn't want you to memorize anything, it wants you to experience it. This learning by doing approach is reinforced by the AI assistant. Beginners usually expect strategy games to punish them for inefficiency, but Europa Universalis V softens those edges. If you don't know how trade works yet, you can automate it. If building construction overwhelms you, you can automate that too. The assistant is far from perfect, occasionally spending money in strange ways or reorganizing armies oddly, but it buys you breathing room. The most surprising thing for newcomers is how alive the world feels because of the population system. Unlike older games where a province was just a container for numbers, Europa Universalis V shows you the groups of people living there. Farmers, craftsmen, nobles, clergy, each with their own language, religion, and role in society. For a beginner, this human element makes the mechanics easier to digest. Taxes no longer feel like arbitrary sliders, but decisions affecting specific communities. Religious intolerance doesn't just lower a number, it causes actual groups to migrate or resist rule. Many beginners expect a sterile spreadsheet, but Europa Universalis V pops behave in ways that make intuitive sense. You raise taxes on a certain group, and instead of merely seeing a color change in a menu, you witness a growing tension in your provinces. Lower classes might grow angry, and influential estates might push back politically. For a new player, these reactions create an early sense of cause and effect that feels more natural than the abstract systems of previous games. The character system reinforces this sense of life. Your ruler, your advisors, your generals, they aren't just portraits with stats. They have strengths, flaws, relationships, and personalities. A talented ruler may gradually grow decadent. A promising advisor may get caught in intrigue. A general might rise to fame or fall into disgrace. For a beginner, these stories help anchor the larger systems. The world becomes easier to understand because it presents itself through people rather than formulas. Of course, beginners also hit the rough edges quickly. The game's interface, despite improvements in tooltips and clarity, still has deep structural problems. One of the first frustrations is discovering that many clickable elements don't look clickable. New players find themselves slowly dragging their mouse across the screen, waiting for a tiny color shift or tooltip to signal that an icon isn't just decoration. It feels like searching for secret passages in a digital house you've never been inside. And then there's the technology tree, an enormous, sprawling creation, so large that beginners simply stop trying to understand it as a whole. The inability to zoom out far enough to see the full structure leaves new players relying on short-term decisions rather than long-term planning. Beginners often end up picking whatever seems immediately useful rather than following a strategy. Paradox veterans call this a flaw. Beginners often accept it as relief. You're not expected to plan centuries ahead. The game, whether intentionally or not, encourages you to focus on the present. Where Europa Universalis V challenges beginners most is in the way consequences unfold. In many strategy games, you make a decision and see its results immediately. In Europa Universalis V, the game's world is so interconnected that cause and effect sometimes blur. You might adjust a tax policy and only see the real fallout decades later. You might win a war and discover that population shifts slowly reshape your provinces long after the peace treaty. Beginner players often mention a sense of uncertainty, an inability to tell whether success came from good play or from hidden mechanics working in the background. And yet, this uncertainty becomes part of the experience. New players begin to view Europa Universalis V less like a puzzle to solve, and more like a historical simulation to survive and shape. Instead of expecting perfect predictability, beginners learn to read trends, adapt to surprises, and adjust strategies in real time. They stop asking, "Why didn't this work exactly as I expected?" and start asking, "Given what just happened, what should I do next?" For beginners, this shift in mindset is where the game truly clicks. A major part of the beginner experience is the sensation of discovery. Small victories feel enormous. Your first successfully managed war, even a small one, feels like a grand turning point. Expanding your first province feels like a genuine achievement. Forming your first diplomatic alliance or rescuing yourself from an economic crisis feels like mastery, even if it's just the beginning. These moments accumulate over your first 20 or 30 hours, creating the sense that you're slowly learning the language of the game. Historical events add another rich layer. This game doesn't just present them, it explains them. When the Renaissance appears, when the plague spreads, when the Hundred Years' War is referenced, the game gives context. Beginners find themselves learning history not through lectures, but through lived consequences. It is common for new players to pause the game just to read an event in detail because the writing is engaging and often directly tied to their situation. Yet, beginners also need to understand that Europa Universalis V has quirks and that Paradox games rarely launch in pristine condition. Even short beginner playthroughs reveal bugs, performance drops, and strange AI behavior. A new player might notice that sometimes the economy behaves oddly, or that an ally makes a baffling diplomatic choice. These moments do not ruin the experience, but remind players that this is a living, evolving game that will grow through patches and updates. The beginner experience after dozens of hours becomes a journey from confusion to confidence. You start unsure of what anything means, relying on the tutorial and AI assistance. Then you begin turning automation off, one system at a time. Eventually, you find yourself setting your own goals, forming a specific nation, dominating a trade region, mastering your internal politics, and at some point, without realizing it, you become fully immersed in shaping centuries of history. What beginners should expect above all is a game that respects their curiosity. Europa Universalis V never stops being complex, but it stops being opaque. It rewards patience with clarity, mistakes with understanding, and experimentation with new possibilities. It is, for the first time in the series, a game where beginners can feel both challenged and welcomed, where the world is vast, the systems are deep, but nothing is truly out of reach.